From the octagon to the crowd. These are the times UFC fighters took the fight to the crowd. We have to go back to 2014, when the rival between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier heated up. In a moment of anger, Jones took the fight to the crowd, sending shockwaves through the arena. But that's not all. Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor's rivalry reached new heights in 2015, when Diaz took the fight outside the octagon. The two were known for their intense back and forth, but this moment took it to a whole new level. Then there's Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor, whose 2018 fight ended in chaos outside the octagon. But these aren't the only times the UFC has seen fights escalate beyond the ropes. Jason Miller versus Tim Kennedy in 2012, and Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg in 2005. It's no secret that crowd control is essential in the UFC, but these instances show just how quickly things can spiral out of control. So hold tight as we take a wild ride through the times UFC fighters took the fight to the crowd. From the octagon to the crowd, it's time to talk about the UFC's wildest moments. First up, a brief history of the UFC. When two fighters step into the octagon, determined to be the last one standing, sometimes things get a little too real. And that's where the importance of crowd control comes in. UFC fighters are expected to keep their aggression within the octagon, but there have been instances where they took the fight outside of it, much to the shock and amazement of the crowd. Now, let's delve into the rivalry between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier, two fighters who know each other all too well. Their beef started back in 2014, when Jones took the fight to the crowd in a now infamous incident. It sent shockwaves through the UFC community and forever changed the dynamic of their rivalry. So buckle up, because it's time to relive one of the most intense moments in UFC history. From a rumble in the cage to a ruckus in the crowd, it's the Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor rivalry. A brief background on these two fighters. Nate Diaz, aka the Stockton Slugger, is known for his brutal jabs and submissions. Conor McGregor, the notorious one, with his flashy footwork and knockout power. These two first met in the cage in 2015, and it was fireworks. The incident in 2015 when Diaz took the fight to the crowd was lit. Diaz and McGregor were getting heated in the cage. And suddenly, Diaz swung his gloves off and jumped over the cage to fight the fans. The impact of the incident on their rivalry was intense. It only added fuel to the already blazing fire between the two fighters. Fans were even more hyped to see their next showdown. And the rest, as they say, is history. From a heated rivalry to a brawl that took the fight to the crowd, it's Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor. The two MMA legends have a storied history, regularly exchanging verbal jabs and insults leading up to their highly anticipated fight in 2018. But the real drama occurred after the fight was over, when Nurmagomedov took the fight outside the octagon and into the crowd. The incident not only resulted in fines and suspensions for both fighters, but also added fuel to their already intense rivalry. The impact of the incident was felt for a long time in the MMA community, with fans eagerly awaiting a potential rematch between the two fighters. But for now, the tension between Khabib and Conor remains as heated as ever, with both fighters eager to prove their dominance in the octagon. From a fiery war of words to an infamous incident that took the fight to the crowd, let's talk about a real rivalry between Jason Miller and Tim Kennedy. Jason Miller, also known as Mayhem, was a mixed martial artist and professional wrestler. Tim Kennedy, a retired Green Beret and MMA fighter, Tim was also known for his skills in both grappling and striking. These two warriors had a brief background of exchanging verbal jabs, leading up to their fight in 2012. But things took a wild turn when, during their bout, Miller took the fight to the crowd in a shocking move. This incident sparked controversy and had a considerable impact on their rivalry, as Miller was heavily criticized for his actions. Despite the backlash, Miller stood by his actions, claiming that Kennedy had disrespected him and his family. The rivalry between Jason Miller and Tim Kennedy became one of the most intense and unforgettable in MMA history. Let's talk about Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg. These two were fire and ice in the octagon. For a fiery Hughes and a cool as a cucumber Trigg, the background of their rivalry was intense. The two were not friends, to say the least. The tension between these two warriors began in 2003. Then, in 2005, things reached a boiling point. In a wild moment, Hughes took the fight to the crowd, leaping over the octagon fence in a rage to attack Trigg. The incident was wild, unforgettable, and fueled their rivalry even more. It hugely impacted their rivalry and solidified their place as MMA legends. If you're looking for a classic MMA feud, look no further than Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg and the impacts fights going rogue has on the UFC. And the first up is a biggie. The UFC's crowd reputation takes a huge hit when fights spill into the crowd. As you'd expect, it ain't pretty. People are getting knocked around, drinks are flying, and chaos ensues. It can damage the UFC's image, making it look like they can't control their fighters. And this can lead to a loss in sponsorships and a decrease in ticket sales. But it ain't all bad, because it's not just the UFC's reputation that takes a hit. The fighters themselves can be fined heavily. Yep, you heard it right. If a fighter's actions result in a fight spilling into the crowd, they can be fined big bucks. And we're talking thousands of dollars here, sometimes even hundreds of thousands. But the UFC ain't the only one to shy away from the consequences. They know that fights spilling into the crowd is a risk they gotta take, and they're always looking to improve the safety measures in the octagon to prevent it from happening again. Whether it's increased security or stricter penalties, the UFC is always working to keep the fights in the octagon and out of the crowd. Because a fighting spirit is what the UFC is all about, but not when it's causing harm to others. So there you have it, folks. From brawls breaking out in the stands to fans storming the octagon. Crowd brawls have become a major thing to remember in the UFC. They resulted in heavy fines and legal trouble for the UFC. But also, they have brought in many, many more viewers. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. There you have it, fight fans. Those were the times UFC fighters took the fight to the crowd.